Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with an update to one of my all-time favorite deck profiles while we still have the chance. This is going to be another look at Tengu Plant. So, quick story in two parts. The first thing is, with the ban list that just dropped literally the day I recorded this thing for last format, I figured, why not go ahead, just look a week in advance. We're going to go ahead and include some new cards from Savage Strike that fit perfectly into this type of an extra deck spam theme that incorporates synchro monsters like the good old days, along with some of the link monsters that we've come to know and love as well. So kind of a quick update to the previous version because of the ban list coming out. But on top of that, looking forward into April, I'm really happy that they're finally releasing this beauty. Aromaseraphy Jasmine is going to be awesome for plants, but the big problem that I noticed with it is in OCG. If you look at their format, they basically have limited Lohn Blossom and Predaplants Prior because the Lohn Blossom basically has its effect translated into Jasmine, and then 𝗖𝗓𝗡𝗄𝗅 is probably the best way to summon out Jasmine for free, is you pretty much just turn it into two monsters, both plants, and then you can go ahead and turn, let's say, your Seraph Knight into a free tribute for its effect. So basically, it's so good, it's probably going to get limited, and so for this format at least, we can have some fun. This is one of my favorite decks of all time from way back in 2011 when it was really competitive before the 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗅𝗏 era, and for a long time before that as well. So I wanted to go back to kind of the roots and kind of enjoy it one last time. Hopefully not the last time, but I don't know. I feel like that's the reality here. But in any case, this is going to be a let's build as always, so I'm going to go through and explain my thought process, reasoning, things like that. So if you've never played this deck before, no worries, this should give you a very solid foundation, and you can always go ahead and tweak to your liking. And if you just want to see the alphabetical profile, feel free to check out the description box and the link below. I always include a table of contents section with a timestamp that'll take you to that section and any other part you may want to see, so feel free to go and dig a little deeper if that is what you wish to do. So without further ado, let's build Tengu Plants. As usual, the first step in building any deck is to establish the theme and then to build a core that supports your theme's goals. And here we already decided we wanted to play Tengu Plants for some odd archaic reason, and so we're going to go ahead and of course start with 3 copies of Lohn Blossom. This is of course the monster we could tribute it or any other plant monster you control once per turn in order to summon out another plant from your deck. But fun old thing is that it's not going to be a hard once per turn. So as of now, we can go ahead and maximize on this to get all of our plays started, and it allows us to summon one of 2 amazing monsters, 𝗖𝗅𝗡𝗆𝗍 and 𝗆𝗍. So essentially they start off in a very similar place. They're both level 1 plant tuner monsters that can be used for link plays or synchro plays, and then they each come back in some way. 𝗖𝗅𝗡𝗆𝗍, of course, is the broken one that got banned because of Crystron Needle Fiber and such in the OCG, because all you need to do is send the top card of your deck to the graveyard to revive this thing for free once per duel, and usually that discard or mill off the top of the deck rather is actually going to be beneficial because of the cards you're playing in this strategy. It's also an earth monster, which means it's very easy to go for Nichiria Beast, you know, the little tiger here. We'll talk about that down the line. And of course, 𝗆𝗍 is going to bring itself back by banishing a plant monster from your graveyard and then increasing its own level by the banished monster. So you could banish 𝗖𝗅𝗡𝗆𝗍 after you've used its once per duel effect in order to turn 𝗆𝗍 into a level 2, or you could get rid of a Lohn Blossom or some other level 3 plant in order to make it into a 4, which is extremely relevant now that we have 2 very powerful synchro monsters at levels 7 and 8 from Savage Strike coming up right here. So we'll go through the next section, and I guess there's just a little side here. The 𝗆𝗍 is a wind monster, which can help a little bit if you're going for specific link monsters like Eve, World Chalice Priestess. And then the spells for the plant engine here, good old ones here. Foolish Burial, normally a -1, but if you go for 𝗖𝗅𝗡𝗆𝗍, it's free. 𝗆𝗍 with setup is free as well, making it a 1-for-1. And if you actually look at the ironic not 1-for-1, that is the pitch a card to summon a card, you at least get to go and summon 𝗖𝗅𝗡𝗆𝗍 or 𝗆𝗍 in order to use them twice, once on the field and then once from the graveyard with the revival effect. So essentially you end up breaking even in this strategy because of the nature of the free revival on those cards. So that's the plant part. We're going to go ahead and expand that just a little bit. But we got to talk about, why are we playing this deck? Well, it's because of Reborn Tengu. Back in the day, Reborn Tengu was insane because as a 1700 attack floater, level 4, you just summon this thing, and it was the perfect all-around guy. Like, this was the dude you didn't want to run into in the schools, in the hallways. Like, this is the guy who's good at, like, every sport, and he's freaking smart. He's, like, you know, he's, like, the crazy guy you want to avoid because he's able to go for synchro summons, tribute summons, card effects like econ, lose in battle, win in battle, get through back row, whatever the case, Tengu always has revived itself, which was absolutely crazy, especially in the context of the tuners that we just talked about. Nowadays, we have a little more flexibility yet in that this card can be used for link summoning, and so the big thing is you gotta somehow get him onto the field, because as long as you don't draw multiples, this card is not too bad, right? So essentially, the way we're going to make the best use of Reborn Tengu is if we can go for 𝗪𝗔𝗪𝗔, a Link 4 monster that's become notorious these days. It's kind of a Pokemon card more than a Yu-Gi-Oh card, but essentially it's a 2800 attack behemoth. It's a Link 4, has all 3 arrows towards you, plus 1 facing forward, and it has 3 mighty effects depending on how many monsters of different names you use for its summon. You only need 2, but you're probably gonna go for 4, because if you have 2 monsters, all the monsters summoned to its zones, including the opponent's zone, gains 300 attack and defense, which is a trigger effect, so exploitable by Ghost Joker, but still very powerful in that everything gaining 300 stacks up quite quickly. And on top of that, the 3 monster name effect will allow you to special summon a monster for free every turn from your hand, which is good because you can get extra extension, maybe get Reborn Tengu into play or something of the like. And then the final effect is the 4 monsters. Of course, you get to draw 4 cards and then take any 3 cards from your entire resulting hand, put them at the bottom of the deck, and that's awesome because in this deck, that means you can go ahead and put away your extra Reborn Tengus, then special summon your Tengu, and then continue going off from there. So in the perfect world, you'd have this thing all the time. So how are we going to do that? And this is where the tried and true Predaplant engine comes in. While we still can, Predaplant 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗪 will be maxed out in this strategy because its ability lets us send a monster from our hand to the graveyard when this thing is summoned in order to go ahead and summon another Predaplant monster from our deck, which will trigger the ability of 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗪𝗓, a hard once per duel ability that lets you grab a fusion spell. Although previously we were just using this with Brilliant Fusion, nowadays you kind of have to play the 1 instant fusion even if you weren't teching it already, because, you know, Brilliant Fusion's finally down to 1. So Brilliant Fusion is probably not useful outside of Gem Knights or decks running the Predaplants right now, because you don't want to draw into the Garnet or other Gem Knight that you're playing. But, you know, instant fusion's still pretty good as like a quick tangent to get this over with. Invoked Raijin's my favorite so far. It's a wind warrior, so it's got some interesting traits. It's got a Book of Moon effect, and although you can't soul charge this guy back on top of everything else, there are quite a number of Monster Reborn-like cards we'll get to down the line, which will help you use its ability down in the later parts of the turn as well. But essentially, Instant Fusion is an alternative pick, but your main pick here is going to be that Brilliant Fusion. That card is going to allow you to send Gem Knight Garnet to the graveyard, which you only play 1 of, in order to go and summon out your Gem Knight Seraph Knight. This, of course, gives you your additional normal summon and is a level 5 Earth monster. It's a fairy, so again, you can use all of the attributes, typing, and unique aspects of this card in this strategy to make specific Link or Synchro monsters, which is really, really fun. But the whole point is here, you not only get an additional summon, which will help you get Tengu or other cards onto the field, but it'll let you yard some powerful monsters. Performage Trick Clown is obviously a popular pick because anytime it hits the graveyard once per turn, you're able to just go ahead, take 1000 damage and revive any Performage monster in your graveyard with 0 attack and defense. It becomes 0 attack and defense rather. So that's cool. You know, you could use it on itself. You could go ahead and if it's not sent to the graveyard again the same turn, keep it around. Hey, it can go ahead and serve as another revival card down the line, which is pretty good. But the main reason I like playing him and Damage Juggler here as an alternative light monster is so that you can go ahead and summon your Seraph Knight, and then Damage Juggler, after he's used as like a hand trap to protect you from damage in some way, or just sent with Brilliant Fusion, can fetch your Hat Tricker from the deck. Essentially, the big point of Hat Tricker is that it's able to go ahead and special summon itself anytime there's 2 or more monsters total between both players on the field, which is a free special summon in most instances. If you're not going, you know, immediately at the beginning of turn 1 going first, it's probably going to be live, which in this deck it almost always is, and it's an Earth monster, meaning you can combine it with the Glow Up Bulb in order to go for your Naturia Beast, negate all your opponent's spells, and put them in a really bad situation. So that's why this specific trio, but essentially just between here, you start off with the Cobra and the Scorpio, which will get you 2 monsters. The Seraph Knight's going to come out, and then you probably get one of these guys, and even if you don't use Trick Clown, and you want to hang on to Hat Tricker to use for some other ability, you probably have something off that extra normal summon, be it Tengu or otherwise, and so it's very easy now with this engine still to set up the 𝗪𝗔𝗊𝗘 play, dig into and bring out your reborn Tengu or your extra lone fires for tuner monsters, whatever, and then build a strong board that has a conglomeration of synchro and link monsters. That's the cool thing. By playing the tuner monsters that the plant engine naturally synergizes with, we actually can cut some link monsters or rely on some extra linking type spamming a little bit less, because some synchro monsters have abilities like the Nichiria Beast we talked about that are actually still worth playing even alongside the link monsters. So that's kind of where we're going here with the Predaplant engine and the performages here. Now it's time to shift gears and talk about some of the tech that'll help our main core function a lot more smoothly and consistently. So starting off, I'm going to go ahead and open this next part with 2 copies of Resonator Call. This is essentially a rota for any Resonator monster, and to that end, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Red Resonator along with 1 copy of Synchron Resonator. So all 3 are tuner monsters. We have Red Resonator's level 2, Synchron Resonator's level 1, and Red Resonator's ability is if this card is normal summoned, you can special summon a level 4 or lower monster from your hand. That could be Tengu, it could be Lone Fire, 𝗪𝗧𝗏𝗏, whatever. It gets things kickstarted, which is the whole point of this, putting an additional monster on the field so you can hopefully get to your 𝗪𝗔𝗊𝗲 more consistently, and of course, the fact that it's a tuner is never a bad thing. It also has a bonus ability where if you special summon this thing through any means, 𝗪𝗔𝗊𝗲, Monster Born, anything of the like, you can go ahead and target a monster on the field, on either side of the field, that's face up, gain life equal to its attack, and that's the only hard once per turn that this card has. So it's a pretty interesting ability. You can take advantage of Seraph Knight's extra normal summon to kick this guy into play, to put 2 monsters onto the board. Lots of cool things happen with this, and again, bonus tuner for extra points there. And then Synchron Resonator, you're mainly playing this because you get some extra variety. Essentially with this engine, with the calls, you have 4 copies of Red Resonator and 3 copies of Synchron Resonator for the sake of drawing them, but you won't draw the Synchron Resonator too much when it's at 1 copy. It's a level 1 tuner that says if you control a synchro monster, which a lot of times you will, you can just drop this guy to the field for free, and then if you happen to use this card for any material or otherwise it's sent from field to graveyard, you can go ahead and take a Red Resonator from your graveyard and add it to your hand, which can help you as a free discard cost, or maybe you can special summon that Resonator or use it next turn for an additional play. So gives you extra value in this engine, and I thought it'd be a little better than playing just 3 copies of the Red Resonator, so that's why we are doing this. It basically helps you reach your 𝗪𝗔𝗊𝗲, and it helps you get your Tengu out of your hand so that you're not in a situation where you can't do the extra normal summon in order to bring him out in the first place. Then, borrowing from World Chalice, which is a deck I'm very excited to be bringing coming up in the near future, is 𝗪𝗍𝗄𝗎, the ultimate Forbidden Lord. Now, this card looks like a fake in terms of like, whoa, why is it 𝗪𝗍𝗄𝗎 in 1 card? Well, this is like an old Jump promo, and this card is absolutely nuts because of how old it is and how it doesn't have proper restrictions. So, cannot be normal summon or set, and it's like a level 10 monster, but he says you can special summon him by recycling every one of your monsters in your graveyard. They go back to your deck and extra deck, shuffle them all up again, and then you get to go and summon this guy for free. So he puts himself on the board automatically, recycles everything in the process, so if you keep a Tengu out, you can now go through 6 total Tengus, which is stupid. Why are you able to do this? I don't know, but 𝗪𝗍𝗄𝗎 is around for that purpose. It also has a Foolish Burial effect if you happen to attack with him, and he has like an 𝗪𝗍𝗄𝗎 style automatic win if you happen to play those pieces and send them all, but we're not doing that. Foolish Burial might come up, usually doesn't, but the big thing here is it's a free special summon who happens to recycle everything, and especially with Soul Charge being gone now, you don't care as much about throwing your entire graveyard back into your deck. You'd rather draw into them and special them for free, which this deck's kind of designed to have a ton of extenders in that way. Whereas you can't necessarily, rely on your grave setup becoming more useful now that Broken Soul Charge is out of the picture. But 𝗪𝗍𝗄𝗎 is really funny, and of course, as I mentioned, I just can't wait to bring World Chalice to you guys as well, because it's a very similar deck to this, though a lot more archetype specific. Then we have a trio of revival cards. Soul Charge would have been part of the plant, the engine there, but these cards are more just extenders. So Monster Born, everyone knows, reborn a monster of your choice, and that's extra good when you bring back an entire synchro monster or a link monster who now has levels or link rating that can combine with other monsters to keep climbing up, so you get extra value. Monster Reborn, which I usually just nickname MR², is basically able to monster a born between 3 monsters you show to your opponent. They choose one and you get it, the other ones are banished. But the cool thing about this thing is if you go and choose 3 lone Fire Blossoms or something along the lines, maybe you just have a bunch of monsters you don't care about losing, you get one good monster out of the exchange, and your opponent really may not have too much control of their situation. Plus, it's a hard once per turn, so that's why I just check the one, or play the one copy of this, but it's overall a very solid card nonetheless. And then World Legacy Succession, obviously card that's become more popular over time, but it's a monster born to a zone you have that any link monster, yours or your opponent's, happens to point to. So you can go ahead and summon one of your guys. It again is a hard once per turn. That's why I play one of each of these. If Monster Reborn were out at more than one, obviously you just replace the extra copies of these with Monster Reborns, but these are pretty solid replacements or cards alongside it. It's honestly very, very good in this type of a deck, and so I definitely like them as extra play makers down the line once you got things rolling. And then speaking of playmakers here, we have here a single copy of the 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗊, just because you set this, since you're not playing any other traps, you can actually activate it the same turn, and it just becomes a monster. The fact that it's a trap puts it one step above things like one-time passcode, I feel, simply because you can actually use this as a defense to bait your opponent out if you want, and that flexibility is pretty good. It's like, yeah, this thing could get sniped by like a stray twin twisters, but since you're not really playing anything else that could die anyway, I don't feel like that's too significant. The extra flexibility of this card is pretty much going to win out, but I don't know, maybe it's like non-significant. They're both pretty much the same card. We have Red-Haired Hasty Horse, which is a level 5 monster, good for synchro summoning some of the higher new guys, but it's awesome because if there's a column with no cards in it, so the up and down row of 4 or 5 between your opponent's zones and your own, you can just drop it right there. If something happens to be placed in a zone in its column, it dies automatically, but you don't care because you're just going to use it as a link material or synchro material anyway, and it has 2,000 attack points, but it can cut its attack in half for one turn in order to attack directly once per turn, which is pretty good. You could close out games with the extra 1,000 there or something, but realistically, it's free link material, or if you have the luxury of a good tuner monster, you can go ahead and summon a synchro monster of a level 7 or 8 with this guy as well, so I really like it for that. And to that end, we're playing a copy of 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗄𝗖𝗍. This is a level 3 warrior tuner monster that basically says if you have link zones open, you can just go and summon this in defense position to one of those zones once per turn. So can't really use this card in the first phase of the game, as I call it, pre-𝗖𝗢𝗄𝗧 or other link monster. These two can, and that's why they were kind of first here, but 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗄𝗖𝗍 is still really good in that being a level 3 tuner means you can combine it with your Reborn Tengu, with your 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏, with your Red-Haired Hasty Horse, and a bunch of other things in order to make the really powerful synchro monsters we got in Savage Strike. Or, of course, you can use it as link material. So very flexible card, so I like its ability to extend your plays, and the fact that it's a tuner is finally coming into play. I've always wanted to tech this card in, but until now didn't really have a reason. Now we do. And then the last kind of like extender type of thing is Blackwing Steam the Cloak. This thing will need to be normal or special summoned in most instances. You're not playing Armageddon Night while it's at 1 in order to search this guy, but Foolish Burial can tech it out or something. Basically, if this card is sent from field to anywhere else, it gets well, anything besides shuffled into your deck, it will leave a Steam token. It's essentially another copy of Reborn Tengu in that aspect, and then once per duel, you can sack any one of your monsters in order to bring this card back from the graveyard, at which point it will leave and then become another monster. So basically, this card is always 2 cards, which is really nice. The extra value is pretty cool. You can only use it for synchro summons alongside other Blackwing monsters, which is kind of annoying, but you know, it's always good as a link material. You potentially could experiment with this card along with a synchro monster like the level 5, I believe 𝗲𝗏 the Shining Star is a pretty good one. That helps you go for level 8 synchros easily, like the Borreload Savage Dragon that just came out. But realistically, Steam the Cloak is in here just because it's value. It's like a mini Dandelion of sorts if Dandelion were much, much less broken. So essentially, that's why this card's in here. And then the last 5 cards in my deck I like playing are 3 copies of Ash Blossom because you need defense, and 2 copies of Called by the Grave because you need defense. So both of these cards are actually pretty good aggressively defensively, so you can use it to protect yourself or to just stymie your opponent. The fact that they're both very flexible in that Ash Blossom's a tuner monster and Called by the Grave can just negate the effect of that monster for the turn cycle is absolutely nuts on both of these. You could play around with the specific slots here, but I feel like these 5 give me the most range, and I chose to play 3 Ash Blossom over 2 Called by the Grave, just because even though Called by the Grave is not restricted to a hard once per turn, the Ash Blossom being a monster and a level 3 tuner no less makes it a lot more valuable in this type of a Synchro Link hybrid. So that's why we're playing the cards that we are. But again, you can always feel free to change some of the tech choices throughout this deck, or any of the decks for that matter. This is just kind of a suggestion on how I like playing stuff. Synchro monsters first, just because there's only a few of them. We already talked about 𝗪𝗔𝗔. Got Black Rose Dragon here. So this thing is awesome because you're not really keeping any specific cards on your field, like trap cards or field spells. So you could freely blow up the opponent's board with this card. And of course, it's a lot more, of something people remember now that the Sisters of the Rose Duelist pack came out. But essentially, this card works with plants. You can banish one from the graveyard in order to make your opponent's defense monster go to attack position, make its attack 0, which can let you slam your cards into them for game-winning damage. And don't forget, 𝗤𝗏𝗄�sword Dragon switches things to defense position. I'll just leave that little, fun fact out there for you guys. Then we got the new cards in Savage Strike. So on the left, we have a level 7 generic synchro monster called Cyber's Quantum Dragon, 2500 attack, 1000 defense. And its ability is essentially going to be 2 things. The first ability is that it's able to go ahead and protect all of your other cards from targeting or battle as long as you control a Link monster, which, check, this deck is always trying to do. And then on top of that, its second ability is a fusion of Neo-Spacian Granmole and Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning, in that it's able to attack an opponent's monster, and once per turn, bounce that guy immediately to the hand. So no destruction, no targeting other than by your battle declaration. So very easily getting rid of annoying monsters that may even be protected. And then if it does that, it can attack again in a row. Can't bounce a second monster, but 2500 attack points, you're probably clearing out at least 1 Link monster, maybe 2, between its effect and its extra attack. So very solid card. It can dismantle boards just so easily, and so I wanted to play this thing alongside Black Rose Dragon. Whereas Black Rose is raw power, this card just gives you so much breaking power in terms of getting rid of protection, getting rid of multiple monsters so your opponent loses resources. And of course, you keep it on the field as opposed to losing it to Black Rose's own self-destructive ability. And then Borreload Savage Dragons, the 3000 attack behemoth, but not for long because it's a generic level 8 synchro. Essentially, the generic aspect is one reason to cut Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, who's not on the screen right now, but Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon was basically cut for this card. Much easier to summon, same stats, and its ability is you could go ahead and take one of your Link monsters in your graveyard, maybe something like the 𝗪𝗔𝗔 you just use for your plays, equip it to this guy, and that does a few things. First, you give this monster half of that creature's attack points, so 𝗪𝗔𝗔 is going to give you 4,400 attack points total on this thing, which is just dumb. And then on top of that, this card will take that Link rating of the monster and gain Boral counters. And so every one of those Boral counters becomes an Omni Negate once per turn. And that basically means you're able to negate not only a monster effect like Crystal Wing could, but also a spell or trap. Again, a hard once per turn on that Omni Negate ability, but it's still amazing that turn after turn you're getting a free negation in, and it's got more reach than Crystal Wing, and it's easier to summon than Crystal Wing. The only thing is you need to have a monster in the graveyard, which realistically, even if you make a Link 2 as a stepping stone to a bigger monster, which this deck will always want to do in some capacity, you're able to get 2 turns of Omni Negate and a decent chunk of attack points on top of your 3000, which ultimately makes this a devastating boss monster. So it's another Borreload Dragon that's, kind of dumb. Obviously, Guard is probably the only bad one. Everything else is good. And so, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. We got new synchro monsters. They're great, so I'm delighted by it. And now let's go through the rest of the Link monsters. The guys you've come to know and love here. We got a copy of 𝗖𝗍 because basically you have different types and attributes. That's why I've been mentioning all those different things, because you can turn them into 𝗖𝗍. And she has side arrows, which is nice. She has the ability to protect things, which is nice. And she'll become even more useful when we play World Chalice, coming up soon. Then we got, of course, the Nightmares for, I got the arrows wrong, Nightmares for the Link 2 monsters. So I like both of these because when you have everything up there, you're actually able to gain additional protection from, Dog, Canine protects from card effect destruction, Bird protects from battle. So that's how I like remembering things. The fact that we now have Quantum Dragon to protect from card effect targeting and battle as well is pretty nice, because it kind of fills in the lost spot of Troll, you know, Nightmare Goblin, as well as somewhat Nightmare Phoenix. But overall, these cards are still really good. They have the basic removal abilities. They're linked 2s for stepping stone purposes. I still like playing these things. Even with Soul Charge not in the game, you're still able to get some pretty good use out of it. Probably won't be extra linking nearly as much, but they will help enhance your boards, and that's why I like playing them. Got Nightmare Unicorn. You know, put this with one of the other guys we just talked about. Draw some extra cards. Free removal. It's like Castel 2.0. And then we got the 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗎 as well. Again, a little harder to use because I don't know how worthwhile it really is to go for multiple monsters just to go ahead and triple co-link this thing when you could just go for Savage Dragon. But nonetheless, still a very powerful card. Don't forget, having 2 cards allows you to banish your opponent's card preemptively, and then the 1 co-linked ability lets you do double damage through monsters, which is still really solid. So it's in here for the chances where you'll be able to make good use out of him, and his arrows aren't bad for, you know, going left and right as well. And then we got the trio. We got the 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Dragon, 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Dragon, and then I'll talk about one more in just a second. But essentially, this guy's dumb because he steals stuff. You guys know that, and he's not touchable by monster effects. And this guy is good because he ends games out of nowhere, and don't forget he combos with Black Rose Dragon. Both of these are absolutely nuts. Savage Dragon's good in its own way as well, by having that Omni Negate, but I just love the 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Dragons. And then the last card I like playing at Link 4 is the Nightmare Griffin. This thing is in here basically as kind of my firewall replacement of sorts, in that it's easily made just by having 2 monsters. So when you have fewer resources, this card is a boon, because its 2 abilities are recycle a card. Now with Soul Charge gone, that's not the biggest thing you're trying to prioritize, though it's kind of cool if you're able to reuse your Monster Reborn or something like that. The big reason you want to play this thing is in the instance that you don't have a big Link monster to go for, you know, with like a huge board. You just summon this alongside an 𝗖𝗎𝗓 Beast and or your Savage Dragon, and it's basically a skill drain for anything that's not co-linked. So you put this in a zone that's not pointing to your opponent's, you know, extra monster zone or an open zone, or heck, you just put it right under your Savage Dragon or an 𝗖𝗎𝗓 Beast, and all of a sudden your monster effects are all live, but now your opponent has an extra layer of headache that they have to get through before you're able to go and do stuff. So the fact that this card is easily made with potentially just 2 monsters is the main reason you play this thing. If you don't draw the best hand, those extra extenders can go into this with one of your other synchro boss monsters, and it ends up becoming quite powerful for minimal investment. So that's why this card is still in here. I like it for that purpose. It's not the strongest thing in the world, but it does add a significant boost to the boards you're able to make. And so that is why we play Griffin. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks! Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the creation and potentially final rebuild of this deck as much as I've putting it together and just have had fun with this for a very long time now. So we're going to go through the main deck first. It's a flat 40. We got triple Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 1 Blackwing Steam the Cloak, the Lone Crusadia Arborea, triple Exodius the Broken Lord. We got Glow Up Bulb, triple Lone Fire Blossom. Then we got the trio of Performance Damage Juggler, Hat Tricker, and Trick Clown. Then we got our lone Darlingtonia Cobra to search off of our still 3 Predaplant Ophrys Scorpio, triple Reborn Tengu, as the name implies. Then we got Red-Haired Hasty Horse, double Red Resonator, Lone Spore, and Synchron Resonator, and Gemknight Garnet for our 1 Brilliant Fusion, which we're still able to play, double Called by the Grave, Foolish Burial, Instant Fusion, Monster Reborn, and MR². We got our 1-for-1, we got double Resonator Call, World Legacy Succession, and a single trap card in the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigadine for again a 40 card deck. And then for our extra deck here, we got here for Link 2s 𝗖𝗎𝗓 the World Chalice Priestess, and then Nightmare Cerberus and Phoenix. Then for Link 3s, we got Nightmare Unicorn and 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗎𝗓. For 4s, we got 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Dragon, 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Dragon, along with Nightmare Griffin and Saryuja Skull Dread. And then for Synchro Monsters, we got the mighty 𝗪𝗓𝗓 Beast at level 5, Black Rose Dragon, and Cyberse Quantum Dragon at level 7, and 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗓 Savage Dragon is our new King of 8 that has taken over the spot of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. And then for fusions, we have Gemknight Seraphknight for the Brilliant Fusion, and our Invoked Raijin for our Instant Fusion. That's the end of this video, but there's plenty more where it came from. I invite you to explore the playlists on screen to see what else I have to offer, and if you really liked what you saw today, consider subscribing to JD Gaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JD Gaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.